The forest remembers what we do not. A resin tear gathers on a wounded trunk, glittering in low light, thick with the scent of sap and leaf mold. It stretches, trembles, and falls. Where it lands, it does not simply harden. It listens. It holds. It keeps time from finishing its work. A wing beat, a footstep, the soft grind of mouthparts on pollen. All of it pausing as if the world took a breath and decided not to let it out. Amber is not only fossilized resin, it is a refusal. It is the instant when motion refuses to become absence. Imagine the canopy closing over you, green layered upon green, a roof of ferns and conifers in an age before a single human word. The air is warm and smells of spice and damp bark. Light drifts in and breaks into golden dust along the understory. Here, trees bleed resin the way mountains bleed rivers. It starts as a gleam, a lens that drinks the forest and magnifies it, and then it becomes a window through which the far future will look back. Within this glow, the last moments of small lives find their final place. There is no violence of burial, no crushing weight, no roar of flood. There is stickiness, slowness, inevitability. It is the patience of preservation. A tiny hunter waits along a branch the thickness of a finger. The spider senses the world through the harp of its web, each silk line singing a note in air that we cannot hear. A male parasitic wasp threads the maze of stems and shadows, his path drawn by a smell that means another life to complete his own. He touches silk. The web gives its answer. The spider moves with a certainty older than any map. Legs angle, fangs poise, strategy held in the angles of a body tuned by seasons without end. Then the tree above sighs out a tear. The droplet drops through air, meets silk, and both hunter and hunted are folded into a golden pause. Threads remain stretched between them. Fangs remain lifted. Wings remain open in a gesture that never completes. In this amber, terror is not loud, it is precise. It is a geometry of motion, held like a breath behind glass. Elsewhere in the same forest, a different last moment begins with a mistake. A hatchling bird, no bigger than a handful of leaves, slips on a wet twig after a rain, and tumbles into resin that had gathered along a wound in the bark. Her toes are still sheathed in keratin, her feathers soft as smoke, her tail a curve not yet firmed by flight. The resin touches skin and feather and hardens just enough to hold. She still breathes. She still tries. Muscles pull, eyes blink, heart fights the slow tide. The resin thickens, the air thins, and the world narrows to gold. The forest continues around her. Afternoon becomes evening, insects sing. A light cooling wind moves along the ground and carries scent away. By dawn the moment is over, and it will never be over again. In a deeper pool of resin, a lizard pauses mid-step. One toe reaches forward, a belly scale brushes a smooth surface. A tongue tests the world for taste and heat. A second toe finds no purchase. The lizard is light and quick, and so perfectly made for climbing that it almost succeeds in walking on the future. Almost. The resin takes it gently, in layers thin as air. Over hours, perhaps a day, skin detail presses into the viscous field. Eyes cloud. Muscles relax. What was warm becomes the temperature of sleep. When this becomes amber, it will hold the map of scales and the micro-patterns of adhesive pads. It will allow someone in a distant room, under a steady light, to hold not a relic but a posture. A motion. A way of being alive. Even smaller lives find this same finish. A pollen beetle moves grain by grain between the male parts of a plant and the place where plant flesh turns into future seed. The beetle looks like a mote of charcoal to a bird, like a traveler to a flower. Its mouthparts are combs and cups. Its legs are dusted with a golden cargo that means survival for the green world. Many ages later, when forests change shape and colors shift, and the wind learns a new pressure, someone will lift a shard of amber and see those grains pinned in place. Not general pollen. A specific pattern, a texture that describes a certain plant long vanished. We will learn that insect and plant were companions before any flower we recognize had unfolded. The beetle did not plan to teach. Amber gives its lesson anyway. On another day, resin does not wait for stillness. It falls while a struggle is unfinished. An ant warrior meets an intruder along the bark highway that leads from nest to food. Mandibles lock, legs brace. The fight is small only if size is the only measure. Somewhere above, a breeze rocks the crown of the tree, and resin beads up along a healing seam. A heavy drop swells and loosens and falls. It wraps both combatants in a syrup of patience. The two remain in a grip that neither will release first. A third ant arrives, antennae tasting the world for news. Resin touches antennae and sets an endpoint on the message. If you hold that amber in your hand a long time from now, you will be the first to know what they knew. Their posture will describe a map. Their bodies will draw a chain of command and a story of defense. Across the understory, one more last moment is the size of a breath. A tiny snake, fresh from the thin shelter of its egg, threads through leaf litter warm with rot and life. It is made of ribs and intention, and a skull not yet fully hardened to the work of a hunter. The ground is damp. The roots of a nearby tree have pushed through each other and left a small crevasse that catches resin dripping from a wound. The snake's head finds the edge of this trap. The resin is not a drop now. It is a shallow pool the size of a palm. The snake moves forward because that is what a snake does. The surface tension breaks. A first coil lifts and then does not. A second length slides and then is held. The body's many joints make a last wave. Then patience replaces motion. When this becomes amber, it will hold vertebrae numbered by the thousand and ribs like reeds, each one telling a story about the softness of youth and the architecture of movement. The trees themselves keep a record in this resin. A tear that ran down the trunk on a hot day takes with it a skin of bark that carries the fingerprints of the tree. The amber later shows rings of flow, the pulses of warmth and cool that modulated its journey. An air bubble is trapped within. A sphere as perfect as thought, the size of a seed. Inside the bubble is air from a day no mind can remember, its chemistry distinct, its ratio of breath to breath unlike ours. Amber can hold a piece of the climate the way it holds the edge of a feather. A future scientist will lean close, and not only a species but weather and wind will step backward across the ages and stand in the room. Sometimes amber keeps the aftermath rather than the attack. In one drop, a fly sits with mouthparts buried in resin, its last meal unfinished. The shape of its abdomen suggests that it fed on blood. The resin that took it also took the microbes within that blood, or the ghost of them, a faint chemical whisper that hints at a pathogen long before it learned the names we would fear. The fly does not tell a story of plague or pain. It tells a story of possibility. It shows the old partnership between a moving mouth and a moving disease and how ancient that choreography is. In this way, amber is a table where evolution leaves a note about rehearsal. There are moments in amber that are not violent at all. A feather falls from a body to which it will never be returned. It drifts, catches, and rests in resin still warm from Sunday. The barbs remain parted in the clean geometry of airfoils. Pigment granules sit like stars along the shaft. Under a microscope far away in time, the colors sometimes return in the suggestion of shape and shine. Not the whole plumage of a creature, not a design we can mount on a wire, but a fragment that says this was not gray, this was not monotone, this was gloss and pattern, and a language of display. The feather says flight maybe, and insulation, yes, and beauty, certainly. Amber says look. A salamander leaves the shade of a leaf and crosses a strip of bark slick, with resin hardened enough to be a path and soft enough to be a decision. The body that balances moisture and skin and the constant threat of drying makes a choice, and the choice goes wrong by a fraction. One foot sinks. The salamander tries to pull free. A limb snaps and breaks as it fights. There is a wound. There is resin moving into that wound. There is the tenderness of a creature that is built to survive damp and darkness, encountering something that is neither. In amber, later, you can see the missing limb edge, the shape of pain turned into edge and line. You can see a story of predation or accident, and the moment before the next thing that would have happened. You can see surprise made visible. In deep time, a tail brushes the resin that collects along a low branch. It is thin and lined with a ladder of bones. The tail carries feathers like a brush of grass. They are brown and white, and arranged in a rhythm that meant motion and meaning to eyes that saw them in life. The resin reaches and takes. In the finished amber, the vertebrae are separate, not fused, telling us that this was a young body, still becoming what it would be. The feathers hold the architecture of barbs in the absence of the tiny hooks that modern flight demands. They are not for lifting but for warmth and for telling others what you are. This is a page from a book we did not know we were allowed to read. Amber is the permission. The forest where all these endings began learns how to hold them. There are days when resin beads form a gutter along a trunk and join into a runnel that thickens and slows and grows a skin. Leaves fall onto it and become decoration. Insects land and find themselves part of the design. A gust shakes the tree, and a shelf of semi-hardened resin slews away and drops to the forest floor. There it rolls and gathers dust and tiny seeds, and the petal of a flower not yet named. The mass becomes an ovoid, a little planet of everything that touched it. The rain falls, the soil darkens, and the amber that will be is buried. It is out of sight but not out of time. Minerals move. Volatiles leave. Bones change. The golden globe hardens and waits. A person kneels in light a million mornings later and finds that globe after a landslide wakes an old hill. The finder does not know the stories inside yet. They feel the weight and see the glow, and sense that it contains a weather different from any day they have known. In a room with steady lamps and careful hands, the outer crust is trimmed. Then the world inside opens like a pupil to light. The spider and the wasp face each other still. The feather still leans like a thought. The lizard still stretches a toe toward a place that would not hold it. The snake's spine still makes its quiet river. The beetle still carries its pollen like an oath. The air bubble still holds the breath of a tree. The salamander still draws the line between attempt and outcome. The tail still says youth and heat and pattern and the claim of a body in a world that did not yet expect such bodies. What do we learn from this gold that refuses to forget? We learn that behavior can fossilize. A strike in progress can outlast the stone that once framed it. A feeding mouth can remain open forever, and a wing can remain halfway to flight. We learn that ecology can fossilize. Pollen on a leg and plant fragments in a drop and a flower part pressed like a signature tell us who fed whom and when and in what season. We learn that climate can fossilize. Air kept captive, resins layered in flows that repeat with heat and cold, the chemistry of ancient seasons that can be measured and compared to the weather of our own lives. We learn that vulnerability can be as durable as bone. The soft bodies that never leave their marks in mud and sand can leave them here. Amber is not a museum, it is a conversation across eras. The forest speaks, the drop answers, the creatures reply without knowing, and we complete the sentence. In the lab, lenses draw closer. Light changes angle. Hands hover. Each specimen has a way it wants to be seen. There are tricks of how to shine a beam so that barbs glow or scales appear, or flow lines reveal a storm in resin. There are gentle methods for polishing so that nothing precious is lost. There are errors too, and a heartbreak when a careless touch breaks a window that will never reopen. The work is slow because the makers of these artifacts work slowly. A tree takes minutes to bleed a line. An insect takes seconds to land. Time merges into patience. Not every golden stone is honest. There are fakes, clever and cruel, with modern insects trapped in heated resin that looks old to the untrained eye. But amber tells the truth if you listen. The surface shows flow that is not human. The inclusions know a choreography that modern air does not teach. The edges of wings have a wear that matches no recent season. The color of age is not a dye, it is a depth. Those who study amber learn to read this honesty with the same intimacy as a tracker reading the prints of a herd in dust. They lean close, and the world leans back. For the creatures within, there is something like mercy here. Their ends are not scattered, they are gathered. The spider never strikes, and so the wasp never dies of venom. The bird never falls again, and so the ground is no longer a danger. The snake never finds hunger or fear or growth or triumph, and so remains forever the moment when life is about to become what it will be. There is loss in this, the loss of everything that would have followed. There is also a kind of keeping. That first intention remains visible, and intention is more than accident. When we place amber on a table beside bones and shells, the conversation changes again. Bone tells of structure and force, shell tells of pressure and chemistry, amber tells of behavior and moment. Together they give a picture that none could offer alone. This is how a forest sounded. This is how the air held light. This is how a small body moved among leaves. This is how a large body announced itself to the understory. This is who hunted whom, and when, and how the predator and prey were both caught by something older than either. This is not a collection of deaths. It is a chorus of pauses. A day comes when a child presses their face to a glass case and sees a spider forever poised above a wasp. The child breathes fog onto the glass, then steps back. The amber glows the same as it did in the forest. The child will not remember the exact species name that a card offers. They will remember the feeling of a last moment that did not vanish. They will carry it into a future where most everything speeds, where motion is the measure of meaning. They will remember that sometimes the most important parts of a story occur in stillness. Amber teaches in this way, not by argument, but by the example of a held second. There are pieces of amber that hold rain. The drop struck the resin at a slant and left a dimple. Another drop fell and split and left a spray. The pattern is a map of a single brief weather. In another piece, a filament of fungus stretches across a fragment of leaf and shows where decay was about to begin and where preservation interrupted it. In another, an air bubble has cracked into smaller rooms, and each room changed the way light passed within it as the amber aged. These are not grand finds with names that become headlines. They are minor events that say everything about how life proceeds. It proceeds in little acts of contact, pressure, glancing blows, near misses, brushes, grazes, and the simple weight of air. When night came to that old forest, the resin on trunks and branches cooled and stiffened and took on a skin of dust. Insects slept and woke. Birds tested their future wings. The wind moved and then stilled. Somewhere the ground opened in a quiet slump and buried what the trees had abandoned. Seasons fell like cards, centuries like leaves, millennia like the slow fall of mountains. In that time, resin taught itself to be stone. When at last light reached it again, it was ready to teach. The lesson was a simple one. Life moves. Time moves. Sometimes, with help, the moving can be kept where we can see it. There are other ways to preserve last moments. Volcanic ash can blanket and freeze like a sudden winter. Lake mud can isolate and filter and hold. Ice can whisper you will not feel this if you slow enough, and then keep you long past remembering. But amber gives us one thing the others cannot. It gives us smallness, it gives us intimacy, it gives us the curve of a hair, the shape of a footpad, the geometry of a web, the grain of a feather. It gives us the smiles and frowns of the inhuman world. In this way, amber insists that the scale of wonder is not only in the vast body or the loud event, it is just as much in a flight interrupted by a golden glove. If there is a single truth that repeats across these hard flowers of time, it is that nothing is too brief to matter. A wasp crossing a web. A beetle stealing a meal that will make a seed, that will make a tree, that will make a shade, that will shelter a body, that will leave a bone in a place that will become a hill. In amber, the middle of that chain becomes visible. It becomes a point of reference, a coordinate you can rest a fingertip against. The fingertip warms the gold, and for a moment the light inside deepens. Something like recognition passes through you, not of species or era, but of narrative. Something happened here. It is still happening. At the end of a day in the lab, the lamps go off and the room breathes its own cool air. The amber remains quietly luminous in the dark, as if storing all the daylight it has ever known. The last moments inside do not mind the dark. They have been practicing it for longer than our kind has practiced anything. When the lamps come on, they will be there again. The spider will not have struck. The snake will not have moved. The feather will not have fallen further. The lizard will not have found its purchase. And yet, through their refusal to complete, they will continue to move us. Trapped forever is not a sentence. It is a description of how time can choose a few instants and keep them open. Amber is the doorway. The forest is the voice. The creatures are the words. We are the ones who read and answer. In that exchange, across an unthinkable span, lives touch. The touch is gentle. The touch is enough.